All around the world, people are very scared right now. Markets are crashing, people are getting sick and dying, and in many different ways, all of us are asking, what's next? But there's one thing that I'm not particularly worried about, and that's the long-term viability of Tesla. Let's talk about that. I'm Will, and this is Origami Cybertruck. There are two big disasters that I think a lot about these days. One of them is the one that's in the news. That's the virus that's, got the world's attention and is massively disrupting everybody's life right now in both minor and very significant ways. It's a crisis, to be sure, and we need to deal with it appropriately right now. We also have a second, larger, slow motion disaster. It's a giant train wreck that's not on the nightly news. It's a disaster that in time will birth many, many, many other smaller disasters that may, to some people, seem disconnected. There are going to be new viruses coming out in the future. There will be giant storms, giant weather events. There are going to be fires, and there's going to be population displacement, which probably isn't going to be pretty. There's going to be ecological damage, there already is, on a grand scale, and an overall system collapse. We're seeing that start now, but people aren't taking it seriously, most people anyway, to the extent that it needs to. Okay, Mr. Doom, you might be thinking, what does this have to do with Tesla? And I want to make a couple of points, and then I'll kind of tie it in together. The first thing is that Elon Musk is one of his great talents, and he has many, but one of his greatest talents is that he's able to see the present very clearly. He's able to separate, preconception and ideology and everything else from the reality of the current situation. In a world where so many people are, burying their heads into the sand to what is actually happening around them in reality and trying to, put their theories and their spin on the world, Elon Musk is able to actually see what's going on. And that provides a huge advantage in innumerable different ways. Let's go back in time a little bit. 2010. Let's remember now, 2008, the global recession started. And it was just terrible. I remember this time myself, it was just a disaster. And even by 2010, things were still really bad all over the place. Tesla, it was a startup, an EV manufacturing company in a world where, everyone said that was a crazy thing to be doing. And in 2010, they hadn't yet gone public. They would in kind of the middle of that year. They weren't yet building any Model S's. They were still building Roadsters, and they didn't even have a real factory yet. They were, I think, building their Roadsters out of a converted auto dealership, basically, out in California. But then this giant global financial crisis happened, and Tesla already had this strategy mapped out of what they wanted to do. And when GM and Toyota, who co-owned this auto manufacturing plant in Fremont, California that was called NUMMI, when they couldn't figure out a way to move forward with each other and they were both losing tons of money in all their other ventures, they had to dump this plant. And so in the depths of this recession, Tesla was able to pick up NUMMI from GM and Toyota for just $42 million, an entire automotive manufacturing plant for, practically nothing, given the size and scale of it all. On top of that, Tesla was able to buy a ton of auto manufacturing equipment that was inside the plant for pennies on the dollar. In some cases, they actually paid less for the equipment than scrap value, because if Toyota or GM had paid to scrap it or had gotten paid for the scrap, they would have had to pay to get it out of there, and that would have cost more money. So Tesla was able to turn this financial crisis that, in other times might have doomed an automotive startup working in this weird electric vehicle space to, failure. They were able to take this and turn it around into their favor and really help accelerate their plan to transition us to renewable energy and transportation. Tesla takes disadvantages and turns them into their advantages. That's what Tesla does all the time. And it's a key component of why I think Tesla is not going to be damaged in the long term by what's going on right now. We don't know where this current crisis and this current emergency is going to go. But we do know one thing, and that is Tesla has always been able to take a crisis situation or a negative and turn it into a positive to accelerate their mission to sustainable energy and transport. Now, I want to make a quick note here. I'm not talking about just profiting off of a crisis for the sake of, enriching oneself or making more money. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is taking this crisis situation and figuring out a way to accelerate that mission to sustainable energy. And I think that we need to commend that type of behavior. Again, not as a greedy sort of a, in times of crisis, let's profit. That's not what I'm talking about here. But the fact of the matter is there is a gigantic train wreck of a disaster going on that is the climate crisis. We need to address that, and we need to do it in any way that can eliminate those down the line effects. This is critically important. Let's look at some of the ways, before we close, that Tesla is actually able to take some of these crises and turn them into a positive for that crisis, okay? So first of all, we have grid insecurity that's exacerbated by global warming and the global climate crisis. So we've got for example, South Australia, this huge electric grid that is almost an island from the rest of the country. It's very fragile and very subject to all kinds of things, from bushfires to, just overloading and blacking out on the grid. If anything happens to some of these major transmission lines, the whole grid in the south can go down. Tesla was able to put in the world's largest battery backup at the time in Hornsdale in South Australia. By doing so, they were able to put completely out of business gas peaker power plants. So we're addressing the climate crisis right now with that, right? These are battery and energy storage that doesn't use a bunch of carbon and emit that into the environment. It can take advantage of solar and wind to generate that electricity, which it then distributes to the grid. Soon, we'll see Tesla do the same thing in a more distributed fashion at all of their supercharger locations around the world. They're going to start adding solar where they don't already have it to superchargers and big battery backups that are going to help secure that grid in all these little locations. So Tesla is using this climate mega crisis to its advantage to actually combat that crisis. And we're going to see them continue to do this. Now, let me just leave you with a couple of thoughts here. Number one, I'm extremely concerned about humanity in the short term because of the virus that's out there. And I'm also extremely concerned about humanity in the medium and longer term with regard to the global climate crisis. These are two really major things. We're paying attention to the virus, but we're really not paying enough attention to the global climate crisis, and we need to be doing both. And I don't know what's going to happen with, Tesla delivery figures for the, Q1 of 2020 or Q2 or anything like that. I have no idea what's going to happen in the short term. But I can say that in the long term, I'm not worried about Tesla at all because they are masters of dealing with crises and impediments and turning them into advantages to further that mission, that critical mission of transitioning us to a world of renewable and sustainable energy and transportation. Anyway, thanks for listening, everyone. I know it's kind of a scary time out there right now, so I hope everyone is, staying safe, following guidelines of health organizations out there, doing all those positive things. So good luck to everyone out there. And this is Will, Origami Cybertruck. I'm out of here. See ya.